little rocky tonight. Jeez, like it was way smoother on the on the other machine. This is the supercomputer, and it's just like acting all crazy right now. So just everything and everything. Let me jump in here, say what's up to Red Rum, Ellie Wynn, what's going on? Astralis, taking a break from high stress with my space fam. I love that. I have a lot to talk about and hang out tonight, but I just want to make sure the stream is acting right. I'm not sure what's going on. It's so weird. All right, at least the connection is sort of better, but I feel like the moon, the footage coming through from this AVIO is not great. But what is going on? Configure video. Bear with me, y'all. Primary ingest, output. Oh, I see. That doesn't seem right. I guess it's not so bad. It's just not smooth frame rate. I'm not really sure what to do about it. But let me know if you can hear me okay. And if you're not bothered by the jitteriness, we can just keep rolling and hang out for a little bit. I see Miguel, what's going on? Hello again. Yeah, is it super jittery? It feels like that. Not sure what's going on. But let me know if my, I just want to know if my audio was actually jittery too. If you can hear the music and the talking okay, I think we can just go with it. Let me know in the chat. Alright, I feel like it's sort of working now, so let's just go with it. So you said my voice is a bit low. I don't want to have any distortion on my voice, so maybe just hit up the volume on your side. I feel like I overcompensate sometimes, and then all the talking ends up getting a little distorted at the high end of it. So you'd think I'd have it sorted by now after 5, 6 years, 7 years of streaming, but no. Still fallible. So yeah, let's take this again. So welcome to Full Moon Part 2. Last night actually, at like 3 in the morning, did the stream. That was the most full it was. Right now, you can see at the top right, it's already waning. You can see that kind of softness of the edge versus the sharpness of the edge on the left. What I wanted to talk about today was just re-upping on the stellar metamorphosis stuff. Love to see Tess in the chat, because Tess, I'm not sure if you've seen what I talked about recently, this whole stellar metamorphosis by Jeffrey Walensky. I think it's a brilliant concept. Like this, just the more I look at it, the more I cross-check it against mainstream understanding of planetary formation, the more I get into stellar metamorphosis. So I'd love you to check that out. I will put the link in the chat. So yeah, just want to re-say hello to everybody. Red Rum at the top, Ellie Wynn, great to see you. Hope the cats are doing great under this mostly full moon, or waning full. Astralis, Miguel, of course Tess, Tetrapodum, who else we got? Yeah, so that's good. Now, so not only did I want to talk about stellar metamorphosis, but also about consciousness and the idea of the holarchy, the fact that things all the way up and down on the scale, the order of magnitude, pretty much has the same basis for operations, even though things variate. And how we can really take into account this idea, that this panpsychism idea that everything is conscious, and consciousness is fundamental to everything. So all things that we know emerge from consciousness, even the ether and plasma and electricity. And consciousness, ultimately, as far as I define it, and others have mentioned the same sort of thing, but essentially, and I'm talking about mainstream through fringe science, the people who do actually articulate what they understand as consciousness ends up essentially being what I've been saying, which is self and other, point and shell, center, nucleus of an atom and its shells, a body and its biofield, a planet and its magnetofield, a sun and its heliopause, or heliosphere rather. The galaxy must have its own, and on upwards, and on downwards on the scale. Makes so much more sense, much more logical that way. And so if we take this other thing, stellar metamorphosis, this other thing, just making sure this image is looking good. Moon is looking awesome right now. I actually see Jupiter coming up to the at the 8 o'clock position. If y'all can see it in your skies, you'll see just to the left you got a very brightly shining Jupiter, and we'll definitely take a look at Jupy tonight. The quick recap here of stellar metamorphosis for Tess and for whoever didn't catch it is that this cat named Jeffrey Walensky, Wolynski, can barely spell. Let me get this link for y'all here. I butchered his name, Walensky. And as far as I know, he is the one talking about this. I really have to find the video where he explains where he came up with it, but as far as I know, this is his thing with a couple of other guys who are writing papers about it. Very few people know about it. So copy this Planetary Revolution. This is a link to the video. Ellie says, cats are in good oscillations. Thank you. Hope you're good. I'm pretty good. I'm calming down right now. I got real stressed out because the supercomputer with a gigabyte Ethernet connection should be able to stream to YouTube, but even the best of us are fallible. So Jeffrey Walensky came up with this idea, or stumbled across this idea, whatever which way, that when you look at mainstream cosmology and you say, how do planets form? How was Earth formed? How was the Moon formed? How was Neptune formed? How was Jupiter formed? On and on and on. If you look this up and really dig, like phys.org, NASA, YouTube, papers, like Wiki, you'll get to this place where you realize like the mainstream consensus science is that planets form in accretion disks by clumping of matter along these spiral arms. So stars at the center, like our sun, and you have a spiral arm emission or creation around it, whatever way we believe that nebular clouds form. I think it's the coalescing of matter along the filamentary structure of our universe. But so we have a star at the center, and planets form in the rings around these planets, these protoplanetary disks from dust and debris. And that's what mainstream really thinks. They really think that planets like Earth formed from 100 million years of clumping of matter together, so basically dust bunnies. And I had read that years ago, and you get to this place where you're like, wait, we understand exactly sort of how stars are formed, and we see that. But then at the same time, planets are different than stars, so how does that work? And then if you look at Thunderbolts Project, and this is where Jeffrey had a comment about how Thunderbolts Project or Electric Universe has this wrong as well. And I think when I watched this today, I was like, yeah, I think he's right about this. Like, when you listen to Wal Thornhill and Thunderbolts, they don't really understand, or at least propose, the idea that stars evolve and turn into planets. And it's just such a simple concept that you think like, wait, why isn't this part of the discussion? And you realize like maybe just they've never heard of this idea. But yeah, so let's say stars form by Markland convection, crossing wires. So etheric plasma wires cross in space, create the spark. Spark is a star. Star goes through a life cycle. Ultimately, not all stars become planets, but at least we can account for planets from the evolution of stars. And so you see this diagram that he presents in this video, and I'm slowly beginning to articulate it a little bit better because it takes time to really grasp what he's talking about. It completely upends what we understand about astronomy and planetary formation, among other things. But if you take this into account, then you think about like the age of things, or at least the progression of things, and then you take into the account of the cyclical nature and the holistic nature of things, where this type of theory, the stellar metamorphosis theory, fits much better into a holistic model of the universe versus stars are this way and planets are this way. Where do planets come from? We're not really sure, but blah, 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 blah. Stars, pretty much everybody is, the consensus is that stars form at the center of nebular clouds by the collection of dust to a point. I'm oversimplifying, but just for the sake of discussion. But I see Buried Axeblade in there. That's a great question. And Genghis Khan, what's going on? Buried Axeblade says, clumping dust bunnies or filamentary dust cobwebs, because dust bunnies are so dense. Maybe you're being not sarcastic, but tongue-in-cheek over there, but about dust bunnies being dense. But I think what Jeffrey's saying about clumping, which really, it's the same kind of thing you naturally come to when you see this idea of planetary formation in the mainstream. You're like, wait, over all this time, like little bits of matter clumped together but then became Earth? Like it just doesn't, it's like the same when you see the formation of the moon from an accretion disk, and the moon clumps together to become the moon, and then it gets hit by a ton of meteors, and then you're like, wait, that's the moon we have? It just doesn't feel correct. It doesn't feel like the visual matches the story. So let me see. But I like the idea of filamentary dust cobwebs because, yes, like the structure of the entire universe and the cosmos and us is the same as the structure of a web, of a spider, because a spider is outlining the magnetic field lines as well. It's actually fractally recursive completely throughout. Tess says, yes, that's my theory too. Planets are cooled, or low-output stars, dwarf stars. The ancients believed that stars had rocky-like planet cores. This is 100%, not, I don't want to say 100% right. I think to me, it seems like a very reasonable theory. 100% more logical and more believable, I guess, than stellar nebular hypothesis, which is that stars form at the center of nebular clouds. We don't really know how. What's that instantiation point, which I'd love to talk about, which is Markland convection. So basically crossing wires, Birkeland filaments tightening and winding up like analog phone cables, and ultimately a string of pearls of stars emerges along this filament. This fractally is the human chakra system. We essentially, us and planets and, us and stars, our chakras are stars, and they formed along a Birkeland filament. And it's the same way we can look at that completely holistically, holarchically, and say that not only are humans born in the same string of pearls of chakras or stars, high energy wire crossing or Markland convection, but that at the same size, on the cosmological scale, stars are formed in the same type of event, and not all of them, but some of them, become Earths, like habitable Earth. Well, not even habitable Earths, right? This is what's such a cool premise about this, is that life emerges when Earth is ready. When Earth's or a star is of a complex enough fractal order of molecules and elements and interactions and spin, axial inertial momentum. So spin of Earth, location of Earth along the Birkeland filament, the complexity of the fractal nature of our skies and the size of it, then life as we know it emerges from that via the processes that I would imagine are the same. So when a child is born, this is Markland convection, the spark. And as humans grow, they basically are a series of stars along a filament. And then they're cut from the umbilical cord from the mother, but then remain energetically connected to the system. And if this is then humans go through a period of growth from a baby to an adult, and then wisen up, shrink and shrivel and lose all their energy and gusto, and then calcify and turn into a moon, for example. So we can look at a white dwarf, a giant, extremely fast spinning, giant white glowing, but very simple materialistically. And over a lifetime, these stars actually cool and their spin rate slows down, and they end up something like a water world, for example, like Neptune or Uranus. And then Uranus ultimately loses its atmosphere, because essentially what stars are trying to do is to become in equilibrium with the space around it, which he mentions being 2 or 3 Kelvin. So essentially stars are trying to reach, to output their energy into the space around, and then also some of the matter is falling back on that star. So that's what we see with our sun, where matter is expelled and then matter is reabsorbed by the sun. So it's basically plasma, what does he call it? Recombination. So by plasma recombination, we get the building blocks of life, and therefore a star like ours, our sun, can turn into a water world, and then that water world can become even more complex and become an Earth. And then ultimately that Earth uses up all its life. It goes through a golden age and ends up calcifying and turning and losing all of it and turning into a moon, Mercury, Venus, dead planets, dead rocks, which were the star cores originally. That's the name of this video. The moon was a star core. And I really think that it seems so much more logical in this idea that that extremely complex objects are cooked inside giant atmospheres of simple elements, and these elements are mixed together and become more exotic and more crazy and more complex fractally and layered, and ultimately can cook stars and planets with planets and moons within star core. Well, moons ultimately emerge from planets. And then ultimately, to quickly finish that up, I see a Rum Vorax, what's going on? Sensei Camillo, what's going on? Long time. Hurdy-gurdy, man. And did I miss anyone else? Let's see. Sorry, I just had my eyes closed. Not really. I'm looking at the moon, but kind of eyes closed thinking about this, trying to articulate it well tonight. Because it really, this is the one thing that I was just like, crazy. I mean, this is so brilliant as a concept because it allows you to derive new ideas from it. So if we take, let's say, moons, like the moon we're looking at right now, so now the moon is an expended Earth. And then we can imagine that maybe some of these features are volcanism. Maybe these oceans used to be the ocean floors of an Earth, right? The moon via ablation, ablation, and solar radiation, and ultimately getting just blasted by everything around it. Same thing as humans. Humans age by using up our energy, but also giving and taking energy in the field around us. So we age, the Earth ages, and holistically, it's also brilliant because we're looking at a solar system that is like looking at people at different ages. We don't. He made a great analogy today, Jeffrey, about how mainstream considers that just because all the planets are nearby in the radius in the orbit of our sun, that they all must roughly be the same age. But he says that that's like saying if I visit my mom in a nursing home and everybody's 90 years old, but I'm 40, everyone's like, oh, you must be also 90 years old because you're hanging out with 90-year-old people. And so Jeffrey makes this sort of joke, but like it's such a great joke because, yeah, that's what we're saying. We're saying that Moon, same age, Saturn, same age, Jupiter, same age. Nobody really questions it because they don't have a fundamental alternative idea. And we kind of live in this place where now planets basically clump together, which we don't see anywhere in nature. And it's also very arbitrary as to what they clump into, right? Do they turn into an Earth first or a Neptune, or is it just random, right? In this stellar metamorphosis, we know exactly where we can place the formations of the different planets because we can actually visually corroborate this. So as stars get dimmer, like they end up being a brown dwarf, like Jupiter, which is bright, but it also dims. And then Saturn becomes even dimmer. And then something like Uranus and Neptune are very dim. And Earth from a distance almost doesn't shine at all. And a moon, you barely see moons, right? And so in orders of magnitude and orders of age, along a Birkeland filament, we have now an understanding of planetary evolution and where asteroids and meteors come from, which is the desiccation and breakdown of moons and desiccated planets. And also, we understand how the complexity of life may emerge, which is that when an Earth is ready and the complex order of our elemental structure and cellular structure is ready, humans emerge, animals emerge. And when I say emerge, the collective quantum particles that build the cells, that build the bodies, ultimately get into a place where we emerge along Birkeland filaments as a fungus, kind of on the back of Earth, and so do all the animal, and we have an experience that is fractally similar, up and down at all scales, except because the framework is infinite, we can achieve all sorts of different roles and perform different roles. So that was a long one, but I think I didn't say a lot. I feel like I didn't say but yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. Please give Jeffrey Walensky a follow and a listen because I think it's one of the coolest ideas I've heard in a while, and Thunderbolts Project does not mention it, and it also opens up the idea of like how life emerges as we know it. And therefore, if you link this with consciousness, where consciousness is now fundamental, and we have panpsychism, which is that everything is conscious, quantum particle to universe, then we now understand the order of what the emergence properties are. So, and why the human body exists, why consciousness exists at all, or like how it exists rather. Your take on why we exist, is really subjective, because I could have one that works for me and you can have one that works for you. So in a way, purpose, becomes a value that is actually now fractally subjective and from a point of view, right? So the purpose, the gravity, the light, the inertia of a system is unique to that system. But it's based upon fundamental structure that is fractally recursive, and therefore we can have a similar experience at all sizes, but all have slightly different variations. Yeah. Woohoo! So Tess says, do you think it's electrically possible for a planet to become a star again? I actually don't think so. I think it's the same as saying, can somebody become a child again, right? Like, if we're talking about fitting this in the most simple way possible, we want to imagine that right now we don't have a holistic or cyclical understanding of how planets exist and stars exist. We do have an understanding of how birth occurs and cellular mitosis, cells split, and how a system goes from an embryo into a full-grown human and then dies. We have all those touch points, all those data points, and therefore why shouldn't we have the same understanding of planets and moons as we do about human life? There's no reason it should be any different. Like, there's no logical reason why planets should form, stars should form one way, and then planets should form by clumping. Even though some people would say, well, the original Markland, what I don't call it Markland convection, I just choose to interpret it that way. That's what it is called. But Markland convection is essentially, in the most simple terms, two wires crossing. And when two wires cross, when the streams cross, you get a spark, and that spark is a star. It's a chakra. It's a Z-pinch. And yeah, what do you think about that? You know what I mean? It's like, it actually, this idea that things really can't go backwards, but that we might be looking at something like Uranus and Neptune as young Earths, as Earths that life may emerge now from Uranus and Neptune. And then the fact that Mars and Venus and the Moon are pretty much dead and desiccated and don't have the right environment for life to continue to emerge from them, which is why there is no life on these rocky bodies. And for something like Jupiter or Saturn, life, the conditions for what we understand as life have also not yet emerged. So it's a very interesting thing and then no one really talks about Pluto, but Pluto, like, when you really look at the images, if those images do it for you, like, we do have planets in all different stages of age. And that's how we study humans and plants and animals. It may as well be how we study planets and stars. So yeah, let's play some tunes here so I'm not just talking and talking, but I feel like the stream is sort of steadied and we got a gorgeous moon. Let me take us over to Jupiter real quick so we can make sure catch up before it disappears from view. I moved the 8-inch over to the eastern side, so this is looking through a window, but it's still on the 8 because I had that just all set up. Great to see you, everybody. Great to see you, Tess. Hope you're doing great. And I did see that I did check out your channel recently. You're doing awesome videos. You ask another question. So Tess says, do you think that the Markland convection creates water in the interior of Earth? Well, I think, like, if I understand it correctly, the initial Markland convection starts to absorb simple, like, either hydrogen atoms emerge, which I think that is probably what it is, that hydrogen atoms are themselves tiny little nebular clouds, right? So as soon as something emerges into existence, as far as I understand it, or at least I'm proposing, is that it takes on this form of self and other, so point and shell, so the nucleus and the shell. And so a hydrogen atom, the simplest form of matter, which, if you follow Ken Wheeler, he says this is high intensity gamma radiation, so light ultimately turns into hydrogen, so very hard light, resonance in plasma turns into hard light, turns into hydrogen, and then ultimately fractally and energy, like through charge, through oscillation and frequency, and then centripetal divergence, centripetal convergence, centrifugal divergence, permissivity. You have a set structure along these magnetic field lines where matter can emerge by coalescing simple forms of hard light. So hard light becomes hydrogen. So I think when the first Markland convection spark creates a giant white dwarf with hydrogen, deuterium, and is it helium? And then this is where my chemistry biology is not so great. I'm kind of regurgitating, but the way I imagine it is that simple atoms are formed first, and then as a star cools and becomes a higher complex fractal order, I think that water emerges from that. So where water really comes into play as far as I think we understand water is probably after the brown dwarf stage. So after Jupiter, Saturn is basically turning into complex water as we know it. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but that's sort of where I understand like water planets to becomes a Uranus and Neptune are water worlds, and that's the kind of water that we understand. Now, Jeffrey and Ken Wheeler both say this thing about phase shifting, right? So it's a different modality, or it's a different phase. And what it is, like water being steam or ice, it's still water. So water as we know it, like ocean water, I think comes in the stage of like middle life of star growth, right? Stars become water worlds, and that's where we have rich oceans. And then the water that we have on Earth is even more refined and complex. So yeah, so I think like at the point that there's a Jupiter and a Saturn, that's where the iron-nickel core starts to form, and that's where in the interior you have oceans surrounded by a methane and ammonia atmosphere, and then things are moving outwards, being exhausted outwards, and then falling back in, but also emanating into space. And so you have this kind of, it's the same as humans, like we are not even the same set of cells after 7 years. We're a completely different set of cells or oscillations in the ether. And therefore, why would planets be any different? Things evolve. And then that's why there is ice on Earth, because the stars are cooling, and therefore Uranus and Neptune are cooler. And I'm saying these things matter-of-factly. I'm saying them within the context of stellar metamorphosis, and I have a lot of faith in this theory now. But I know that I might be saying them like, this is this and that is that. Of course, I can't be sure about any of these things. And of course, there's a ton of data to support the alternative theory. But the alternative theory in terms of the initial phase of like planetary formation doesn't make a lot of sense at all. And then the fact that planets, that life emerges on planets when the conditions are correct, gets rid of all this like, oh, humans are conscious, we got to figure out why. And where did life come from? But if you realize that life just is an emergent phenomenon from complex orders of nature, then there is no problem anymore with consciousness and emergence of life on Earth. And then it also says, yes, life could emerge on other planets as well, and that's great. Then it gives us a lot more fundamental understanding of things. Oh, Miguel, am I going too fast, Miguel? Please feel free to stop me. I know that sometimes I go on, and it's not really as clear as you'd like. But Tetrapodum says, what happens to this massive atmosphere on the way to an M class? I feel like Jeffrey explains some of this stuff in a little bit of a better way, but I just imagine in the most simplistic terms that you have simple matter, and it's very large, very hot, and spinning very fast, that initial kind of spark. and then as it cools down, spins slower, loses atmosphere. It's losing atmosphere because essentially there's permissivity and permittivity, right? Like our skin is not solid. There's really nothing solid like a wall in nature. So stars that ultimately turn into planets or water worlds are losing matter into space because they're allowing things through. But they're also based on gravitational collapse or Markland convection, like basically matter coalescing along a Birkeland filament, or gravitational collapse. You get this, I lost my train of thought for a moment, but essentially you get a process which degrades the atmospheric large size over time, but also internal internal shapes, internal spheroids, like cores of stars, end up emerging because that's an echo of the kind of outer shell. So you have inner and outer shells, just like the cross-section of a human being is layered. And also our human biofield, our auric field, is also layered. So inside stars you have layers in orders of magnitude and orders of oscillation. And then you also, so that's how you have all these different forms, but what really like makes it very compelling is the complexity of Earth and the complexity of Saturn and the complexity of the moon. It doesn't really jive with this idea of dust bunnies clumping of matter. Even if it's slow clumping or fast clumping, it just doesn't, like, it's like saying if you throw a bunch of human matter into space, which is kind of gross, you'll ultimately end up having a person after 100 million years. Or if same thing, any inanimate debris will not clump together to become animated, right? It might clump up to become a clump of things, but to get a complex ordered planet that's swirling with oceans and nature and life like Earth, you need to cook it, you need to bake it, just like you incubate an egg or a child. A planet is also thusly incubated. The fact that it's like not, and Jeffrey makes his point, like nobody's talking about this, like almost nobody even considers it, let alone like is able to, like, he has a few detractors in the comments that are like, you're crazy, but nobody really considers like this is a really profoundly solid answer to how things happen. All right, NGC, hello Spaceling, and Tess, cool. When do I think the expansion of Earth took place? So as far as I'm understanding, right, the core, like the nickel iron core, starts to form around the Jupiter, like brown dwarf stage. And then that's why if you follow, like, Wall Thornhill is probably wrong about a hollow Jupiter, which I kind of went back, and again, I was trying to pick apart Thunderbolts Project, not negatively, but in a way that's like keeping my biases free of loving Thunderbolts and what they've done, to being able to talk about specific points and say, well, Wall Thornhill is right about this thing, but maybe he's not exactly right about this thing. And so, so the expansion of Earth, let's imagine that Earth in its form was a complex liquid rock and silicon, and then ultimately let's take the last stage before an Earth, which might be Uranus or Neptune, and look at what's happening there and say that it's going to lose a ton of its atmosphere, a ton of its ocean. It's going to lose axial inertial momentum, spin, mass loss, and brightness, excuse me. And so I think at that point, all the materials, like we talk about, not I talk about, but if you look up some of these stories about diamonds raining and ammonia rain on Neptune and Uranus, this is what Jeffrey's talking about in terms of highly complex materials raining down from the outer atmosphere into the oceans, then and creating these stratified layers that we see. So stratification, this is something I'd love, like Andrew Hall from Thunderbolts Project to look at. It would be amazing if Gareth Samuel from, is it Samuels from See the Pattern looked at this. It would be amazing if Thunderbolts, if Wall Thornhill talked about this. I feel like this I mean, I'm putting a lot of weight, not a lot of weight, not like I have a lot of weight, but I'm just putting a lot of effort behind this because seriously, like it opens up so many great questions and answers. So I think, yeah, planetary core is formed around water worlds, and ultimately between like a Uranus and an Earth, you have the expansion of the inner core and the loss of oceans, and you find an equilibrium where there's oceans and landmass. And then yeah, we don't know exactly if maybe Pangea occurred still within under oceans, right? So maybe Pangea exploded underwater, and then this huge event, this tumultuous event, turning into from a water planet to a complex Earth, is an event that, you know, is still being thought about. Like, I don't know exactly how that happened, but it actually, like, when you see the two things, you're like, okay, this is making sense, because continental plates and or unified Pangea or multi-layered Pangea, where like some things were together, some broke, or it was all a nickel, like a rocky, liquid rocky core that expanded outwards, and the water, the different types of ocean layers evaporated to basically reveal an expanded core. As far as I understand how Jeffrey explains it, and it makes a bit of sense like that. And so that's why our oceans will eventually evaporate, and the volcanoes will eventually all erupt, and we'll lose a tremendous amount of heat and spin. And that's how Earth kind of ends up, a massive global shutdown, cooling, and not really this idea that we have. And similarly with our sun might not explode into a supernova. Our sun might actually also become an Earth, which is crazy. So yeah, let me put on a song here. Go check out some Jupiter before it's racing away. But we got to see some moon here, and yeah, I think you're gonna love Jeffrey's videos, and I can't wait for other people to either just pick it apart, right? Like, because he's there explaining all these different ideas, and it's just given me so much excitement, like renewed enthusiasm for kind of updating Electric Universe and connected cosmos in a way that really fills in some of the major gaps we have about the conscious, and then you mix that, like I said, with consciousness being the fundamental thing that exists, and then everything emerges from that, including all the forces, all life. And then consciousness is also panpsychism, where everything is conscious. So if proteins are folding and they are aware of themselves, and hydrogen can, two hydrogen atoms can be spatially aware, then fundamentally consciousness is what underlies that. And therefore the structure of the universe plus consciousness ends up giving rise to all the things we see. So integrated consciousness, connected universe with Birkeland filaments, memory stored outside in field consciousness, excuse me, and stellar metamorphosis, like is massively connective, and you get a lot from that, and then we can derive so many more new ideas from there. Soul layer consciousness. All right. Let's rock with some tunes here, some reggae.
Like iron wants to be red, we sharp like waterfalls, so the words cut harder once, so side bombing, mom and dad, those times ain't coming back. Hard to know just how to feel, and could they ever know peace? Maybe I'll just cut them slack, but they work so hard to relax, and when they get their bodies to the sea, I feel the end becomes me. We're the end, become the solution, smiles not confusion, my heart, I release you to the memory of this place, high, stellar far. like adrift. You let me share your armor. Left here with this painted for my own father. Just inseparable like motion and desire. All our scars have really faded, don't retire. Just believe, soul is traveling. Just believe, soul is traveling. Oh, past the pawns on the electric solar sphere. My descriptions of your life was near, and then you were gone, I was reflected lines, and we were erased from time. No wheelless sweet aside. No way, just believe. No way, soul endless, traveling. No way, traveling. Just believe, soul endless, traveling. Picked up another cause, got mountains across my hair. I know it just plays a part. We know it's supposed to end. We sleep with the name we call, send in the mother tree. Got to believe it when I say that we've been here again. Got to believe it when I say that we've been here again.
Alright, so don't know what happened, but I lost, well, let it sit for a moment. I'm not sure what the deal is with this internet connection. Like I said, I have it, should be running like super fast. Don't know what the deal is. But we got some Jupiter in view tonight. That's lovely. This is just the super wide shot here, but let me see what the moons are real quick. I want to say what's up to Nebula in the chat. What's going on? Welcome again. This is actually the 8-inch Celestron Nexstar with I still have the focal reducer in, so it's an F6.3. And I'll take that off in a second. We can look a little bit closer, but just want to make sure I got the moons correct. So Jupiter's to the left, to the 8 o'clock position of the moon for me. And we got bottom left, Ganymede, closer to Jupiter, Io. And then top right, it's Europa next to Jupiter, and then Callisto at the top right. So Ganymede, Io, Europa, Callisto, looking amazing. Awesome configuration tonight. Of course, Jupy at the center. And I'm not sure what, like I said, the connection should be adjusting momentarily. It says it's green, but I got that big error. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. So giant yellow banner. Stressing me out. Yeah, I guess everything is super slow. But did I miss anybody in the chat room? Let's see. Tetrapodum says, that's why they say thought forms matter. These geometries are an expression of ourselves. Absolutely, and planets express themselves, and bacteria themselves, and on. And what's so cool is the structure allows for the infinite dimensionality of things. This is where I think multidimensional or infinite dimensions exist, but it's really the potential is there, and that's infinite. But when you collapse matter into a single instantiation of a star or a point of consciousness or a point of what we hear or touch, then all of a sudden that point now takes on a life of its own. And whether it oscillates in complex orders or simple orders, this is what we perceive as memory versus a whole person, for example, or an object. It says it's regulating here, so I'm just talking a little bit. I feel like the audio comes through okay. All right, let's get one more song in here and we'll zoom in to Jupiter. Again, Jupiter being the largest thing after, or largest star after our sun, and in a later stage of evolution than our sun. So now, in this idea of stellar metamorphosis, Jupiter is now older than our sun, and the Earth is much older than our sun, and the moon is far, far older than Earth and the sun. Now, what specific lengths of time that Jeffrey mentions in terms of 100 million years or 100 billion years, this is Jeffrey's vantage point on it. And similarly with his idea that moons smash into each other to create debris like asteroids and comets, I feel like, I don't want to say he's limited in that understanding. I think he just believes that that's the way it works. And I think to a degree that might be the way it works solely. But I also feel like electrical interactions between asteroids, rocky bodies, might create arcing blasts that shoot out bits of matter. And similarly, I feel like, what was the other thing I was mentioning where, gosh, lost my train of thought there. But either way, Jupiter ultimately might become a planet itself. It might be cooking a brand new planet inside it. And Thunderbolts Project, right? And not only Thunderbolts, but the kind of the vast array of electric universe aficionados and electric universe cosmologists and people who at least entertain that idea. Maybe not Tess, actually. Tess is saying that you already thought about this, but I feel like a lot of people don't really know where planets come from. And some are, in electric universe, it's hypothesized that maybe Jupiter gave birth to Earth or gave birth to our moon. And this idea that large planets emerge from the centers of other planets, I'm not sure exactly that makes more sense than stars or planets ultimately are created along Birkeland filaments at points like pearls along a string. So, let's see. All right, I need to take a tiny little break here. I'm going to let Jupiter run and let a couple of songs run. I actually need to use the restroom. I've been talking a lot and drinking like 3 cups of coffee here. I'm not sure if you can hear it in my voice, but got hyped here for a second. So, what do we got? Let's do... What should we do? Let's do something from Vibration Theater, maybe... from space. Wrong number from space. Oh, that's what I was saying. So Jeffrey Walensky talks about all these different ages of things. And the only reason I think that there might be an alternative to the ages of things is because of the nature, the idea that science is now considering, or like independent science thinkers are considering the idea that things are not constant, like light or gravity, and that ultimately even time measurements are not, 1 kilometer is equal to 1 kilometer, because as you move away, the speed of light changes maybe, and all of a sudden your rulers are all off, and they gradiate different ways. So therefore, this idea that a light year is a light year is a light year, I'm not sure is actually the case. But, so yeah, so even Jeffrey Walensky, who I think is brilliant, and this idea is brilliant, when I listen to him, I'm like, okay, but those couple of points I'm not 100% sure about. Same way he's looking at electric universe and saying, actually, those couple of points, not so sure about. I think it's important to be able to do that. And to be able to have really complex ideas in your mind, but also entertain new complex ideas without getting upset, and then also be able to abdicate poor ideas when they don't work. And the way I can make an analogy to that is just like when you learn a new craft like music or playing chess or stock market trading or driving a car. After a while, you start to throw away all the extra wheels and the extra safeguards, and it becomes second nature. And I think science can do that too. There's no reason to believe in a hypothesis called nebular hypothesis of clumping of matter when that's just an antiquated idea and there's a better idea at hand. It just makes no sense to me to immediately either say, no, that's wrong, or here's how to debunk that, or it's already settled science, versus saying like, oh, let's consider this, right? I mean, that's what I got to say. So, little restroom break here, and wrong number from Space coming through. Thanks for hanging out, Space fam, and listening to me finally sort of articulate the holarchy concept even more concisely than I have before. So, and also check out Jeff Walensky. And Eileen McCusick and Rupert Sheldrake, of course, and Buddy James and Thunderbolts and See the Pattern and Electric Universe Eyes and Sky Scholar, Halton Arp, Billy Yelverton, and others. Hans Alfane, Eric Lerner, Anthony Peratt, and and Ken Wheeler even, not even, but Ken Wheeler is pretty brilliant, even if I don't agree with some of his personality traits. You have to be able to take what you want out of it and understand a bit more about our universe. So, tune coming in. Be back in a few. Alright, hey y'all, hopping back in here because I feel like I got more to say and just wanted to chat with y'all. Yeah, it's cloudy again, so that's Jupiter is completely hidden now, and the moon you can see is extremely, extremely blurry, but let's sit with it a bit, see what goes on. It says my connection's streaming upwards of 18 to 20 megs up, but it's red even though it says 20 megs up. There's something really strange about it. Hopefully you'll see the moon any moment now. Right. Feels so glitchy tonight, but anyway, if you can hear me okay talking, let me know in the chat. And if you can see the misty moon as well. No, Nebula, like I literally have a gigabit Ethernet connection, 900 down, and it should be 40 up. And I set this up like it was working, it always works fine. And then this last week, just YouTube and both computers are like crashing constantly. Internet connection says 800 down and 18 up, and it says then it's 12 up. It's just acting super weird. I rebooted everything, nothing else is taking bandwidth. Typical glitchiness, the glitchy universe. I guess it just doesn't like what I'm talking about maybe tonight. It preempted me. My connection and YouTube preempted this discussion, this monologuing of stellar holarchy metamorphosis theory of consciousness, and all of y'all hanging out to listen. It says it's green. I don't understand. Yo, I see Momark, Mo Problem. What's going on? Nice to see you here. Wow, super cool. Anyone grubbing on mooncakes? You know it. There must be some people here with some mooncakes. Everyone say what's up to Momark. Welcome. You did join a very glitchy stream. Like I was saying, this internet connection tonight is not doing great. But I have been talking about some really cool ideas. We got our full moon, waning full moon. You can see top right already waning. And we were just looking at Jupiter for a Momo. So we shall see. We shall see. Bear with me here. Tess, you have any other thoughts? Let me see if I missed any questions. Up at the top. Nebula Orion says, I'm such a nerd. I put headphones on with the sound of Jupiter with my eyes glued to the eyepiece. After a while, it feels like you're in space. I've definitely done that before. Definitely done that one before, but I don't know. I feel like I never risk playing another video while I'm streaming for several reasons. One being copyright stuff. I know that the sound of Jupiter recorded by NASA is maybe not copywritten, but still, I don't want to take the chance. And then as well, like running two videos while streaming video makes it even clunkier. So just running my own music right now, but I've definitely listened to the sound of Jupiter and checked it out in the eyepiece, and it's ridiculously cool. Let's adjust the image here. It feels like it's not clear yet, but at least the clouds are moving. Yeah, so I'm trying to read, see if there are anybody else have any thoughts on stellar metamorphosis or consciousness being fundamental. I like that idea. It's something I've talked about a lot, but the more I read about it, the more I see mainstream understanding of consciousness, the more I'm led to this idea that consciousness truly is fundamental. Everything really is alive and conscious at a certain level. And I'm talking about, if we think about this idea that like a flock of birds from a distance, like a flock of starlings, you see them almost like a single object, but it's a bunch of starlings. And then each of those starlings is actually a bunch of cells, feathers, but of cells. And each cell is made up of tiny atoms. And therefore this flock, think about a flock of birds moving side to side like a unified item, and then a crowd of people doing the same thing. And then you realize the fractal nature of the universe is completely right in front of us. It's pretty. Tess says time to move to another planet. Perfect. And then you think about like how bad internet was 10 years ago and how you really couldn't do anything. And I even remember back when we had no video online. So the fact that I'm pushing vocals and audio and drawing on the moon and 4K video pretty regularly, sometimes we suffer with this buffer. We suffer with the buffer. Felt obligated on the holiday to at least listen to some tunes and see a moon. Hell yeah, Mo Mark, I love that. Great to see you in the chat. Yeah, so it's a pretty cloudy stream tonight, like it was last night, but I'm going to go with y'all for a little longer. It looks like it may have adjusted. It says excellent connection, dare I say, but I know it's not super smooth. Anyway, let me know what you think about fundamental nature of consciousness. That what do you think underlies everything in our universe? And two, what do you think about this idea that clumping of matter created Earth, like in an accretion disk, versus Earth was cooked basically inside a star, or Earth actually was the center of a star, and that's where complex life emerged from. So leave me some thoughts in the comments. We'll play a song here. Which one? I don't know yet, but let's see. What about play some Catch? Is Catch appropriate yet? No, let me do Light of the Moon, and that one we'll call a little spell here. A little cloud busting song.
This place
Just want to say thanks for bearing with me on this rocky stream. Not content-wise, though. Content pretty smooth, but little execution of stream rocky, unfortunately. So yeah, I can't. It goes from like 25 up to like 8 up. It's all over the place. And let me know if Light of the Moon came through clearly or if it was just like a buffering mess. I can't really tell. On my phone it looks okay, but not exactly sure. Any other thoughts in the chat about consciousness? Anybody? Consciousness? Let's see. Just reading some of the chat up here. All right, so hopefully if the songs are coming through, even if they're buffering, at least you can hear them smoothly. We'll just keep going with some tunes. Some nutty clouds tonight. I feel like maybe it's clearing a little bit. My throat is definitely not clearing. Not that I'm sick or anything, it's just that I've been talking for, like, this is like show number 9. 9 out of 12 days, or 10, what is it? 9 out of 11 days, maybe, of the moon? No, 12 days, so yeah. So it's pretty good streak this month. Had a lot to talk about. Keep going with the jams here.
beaten from the heart. I know no lie. I've been thinking about you all night. Why? No why. I've been waiting for your white light. No why. I've been thinking that you should be mine. So call me up, up, up. Je t'attends, mon amour incestuel, assis dans mon canapé silène, agitant la éternelle, avec mon nom son billet. Je suis la même que ton avant-l'aile chaque jour. Je t'attends, mon amour, avec les mecs sans agréver. Et c'est mon âme magnétique, c'est l'amour magnétique, c'est mon amour magnifique.
Back in here. So music ain't helping the clouds none. Clouds are having a blast tonight, crashing the party. But just want to hop in and talk a little bit more. Again, let me know if the audio is too choppy and it's annoying, but if it's clear, I'll keep going. That was a little will-powered, and I just want to talk, let's see. So Tess says, I want to know who or what controls the timing or of turning off the spark of life from all creatures or cutting off the connection to the plasma filament that keeps us alive and kicking. So I answered kind of simplistically where I said that it's us, but I think, like I was also trying to say, that that's the closest we can get, or at least I can get, to a more fundamental answer. And the way I come to that is if you imagine, well, you don't have to imagine, if we agree that there's a consensus reality, that we all look a certain way and that we all exist, and that we take consciousness as something that is there, then you have to imagine, or not have to imagine, but you have to realize, self-actualize or self-realize that you made your body, your eyeballs, you put everything in the right place, you know how to see, digest, live, and there is no othering. Now, there is an othering of things, but no other being that we know of made your body. You could postulate that. You could say that maybe hypothetically or speculatively somebody did that or something did that. But the actual thing, the actual physics of consensus reality, is that each of us made our own body. And are not just once, but we actively make bodies. So Earth may have made us, but we actually are the ones doing the thing. So you wouldn't say that an apple is different really than an apple tree, because an apple contains all the information of an apple tree within it. So you can plant the seed and create a whole other tree from if taking an apple away from a tree. And therefore we contain the whole. So therefore we are the closest thing you can get to an answer of who made the original thing. It's us, or it's each and every one of us, right? And each and every hydrogen atom, each and every human, each and every planet. And because there is no actual thing, there are patterns, and we see the forms in patterns, but they're ever evolving and ever moving. So therefore, that is, I think, the closest answer we can get to, we make our bodies, therefore we're able to take and make life. So we can make babies, and we can off ourselves and and wars and all this such. So people can take and make life. We also can make our own bodies, and we continue to make them right now. So there's actual physical proof for, I don't want to say atheism, but there's proof for the existence of a self-god, and there's far less proof for like an invisible patriarchal deity, an all-powerful deity outside the self, because the self is as powerful as the greater whole, simply because everything exists fractally patterned up and down. So that's my answer there. And just to kind of consolidate a little bit, we've lost our moon, but I'm just going to consolidate the thoughts tonight, which is that, like, I don't know what's right or wrong necessarily, or if everything is exact or not exact. I want to make sure that I'm not just sitting here being like, I know for sure everything is as such. But I think it's important to like say, okay, some of these ideas that we've had in the mainstream culture are kind of old. Like, I think we kind of need to shift and move to new places and be able to embrace new ideas. Not that plasma is a new idea, it's just the connected whole, the fundamental consciousness, interconnected universe, human biofield storing, well, not just human biofield, but the memory or consciousness being stored in the shells around the centers of things. These are a lot of new ideas that are all kind of put together into an even newer and more exotic and complex fractal form. And so I'm able to send this out to you on a very complex fractal network. And y'all are able to understand this by virtue of having, one, me distilling it, but also having your own backgrounds in order to bounce my ideas off of yours. And I think it's just an amazing fractal recursion throughout, from communication to existence to holistic conscious understanding to planetary formation to where memory is stored to why we exist. Again, Nebula mentioned a great thing, which is, where is it? Nebula Orion says, you are a way for the universe to experience itself. But that, in a way, like, while true, is othering, right? Because you're othering the universe, and then then things are happening to the humans. So the universe wanted to experience things, therefore it made humans, and now the universe is much grander than us, and we're not as important. And I'm again oversimplifying, but if you take that and reinterpret it a little bit, or rephrase it or refactor it a little bit, you can see that we are the universe by virtue of, again, making your own eyeballs, making your own body. And when I say make it, you are arranging things in the correct pattern to exist as an individual entity in the system. No one else is doing this right now, only you, in relation to others. So therefore, you become the embodiment of the universe by proving one small physical trait. You can just take one thing. You can say eyeballs. I made my own eyeballs. As a baby with no knowledge, I made eyeballs, and the most evil person made eyeballs, and the best person made eyeballs, so morality and ethics have nothing to do with it. Which is another thing, right? This kind of idea that only humans and only good humans are the only types of humans, and others like are really not as conscious and they're not as smart, right? This idea that animals not as smart. But I think it's just a perspective, right? It's just that we happen to be at this level, this order of magnitude of consciousness, and animals happen to be at that order magnitude of consciousness. However, I will say that even though people are like, well, animals are kind of dumber than us, animals can actually make eyeballs. And tiny, tiny little bacteria make eyeballs and put the nose in the right place and put the eyes in the right place and put intestines in the right place. This is like the physical proof for self-realization of the God principle. And the God principle being the emergence of a godlike phenomenon from consciousness, which is light. And you could also call it God, you could call it the ether. There are so many words for it, but I think everyone's kind of converging gravitationally towards the same concept, and yet taking different fractal visuals of it. And so we live in a mainstream understanding which is looking at the same exact data and saying it is one thing. And then a small group of people and me right here telling you, well, actually, if you look at it from the slightly different angle, all of it actually looks like it's connected. So we're not saying like old science is wrong. We're saying old science is just not enough to explain the complexity of life. But funnily enough, what I'm explaining is so much simpler and so much more colloquial and layman's terms than if you went right now and looked up nebular hypothesis or how consciousness works from a mathematical standpoint. I've actually sat through some of these videos where I'm like, gosh, this is so complicated. That means if you, and it kind of goes hand in hand with this idea of mastership. When you're a great musician, you can explain things simply. When you're a great chef, you can explain things simply. When you truly understand a concept, it's simpler than, it's more simple than complex. And so when you listen to these guys, as people talk about science and planets and stuff, it's so complicated and so convoluted. And then they use this idea that because it's complex and convoluted, therefore it must be true. And to quote Jeffrey Walensky, he says something great, which is, they know so much about so little. And that's such a great line. He's like, they know so much detail about so little actual information. And that's why their videos are filled up with tons of talking. But the concepts are so myopic when they think about what is life and what is consciousness. Like even the idea of a hard problem of consciousness, when you imagine that an apple tree apples and creates apples, and earth peoples. So things grow fungus and hair, and we are grown on Earth when the conditions are correct. And therefore, there is no like, oh, we just appeared somehow after years of evolution. It's the Goldilocks zone, and it's the fine constant structure, and somehow humans emerge, and we have no idea how it's done. And if you flip it a little bit over, and you're like, oh, actually, no, humans emerged from a conscious universe when the time was right. And therefore, there is no discrepancy between why there's consciousness. It's fundamental through and through. Yeah. Let's see. NGC says, in my universe, I am Shiva. I destroy dust bunnies and save spiders. I love that. That's a great segue here. I feel like it's a little better, the stream. I don't know. Well, not a lot of moon, but at least I'm not getting any alerts on the buffering. Tetrapodum says, is that the right way to say it? Tetrapodum or tetrapodum? Says, I'd regard spiritual and esoteric issues as scientifically relevant because we got that certain connection almost everybody's lucky enough to experience and talk about. Well, that proves in a way my point, which is that no matter what race or species, everyone can make a set of eyeballs, which is a highly complex task to make eyeballs that work or arrange matter in layers by which it can send out an emission and receive optical signals and interpret that. So like this idea of intelligence and smart or self-aware completely falls by the wayside because the physical manifestation of things in and of itself proves that each thing makes itself. There is no human sitting there making the skin of an elephant. The elephant is making its own skin. It might not be able to articulate it in English. You know what I'm saying? Like, it won't tell you, oh, my skin is a layer of this, and it's amino acids, and it's nested hexagons, and so on and so forth. But an elephant can still make skin and tusks and everything. Now, is the elephant not conscious? The elephant is clearly reactive and walks around and eats and remembers things. And therefore, the physical proof of self-actualization is the proof for consciousness being fundamental. There doesn't need to be anything beyond that because it's that simple. And that's what I mean by mastership. When you really grasp fundamentals, then you can explain it without thinking about it too much. well, that's not really the right way to say it. When you can explain it clearly, succinctly, and to pretty much anybody using simpler terms than, well, it's math and only 5 people know the math and they have 10 degrees and therefore, like, you'll never understand it, but only those 10 people will ever understand it. Also, don't ask too many questions because it's already been solved. Like, why bother? Cosmic egg. Okay. I'm going to run a little bit longer here and see if it clears, but I don't know. I don't know. But either way, this was a very articulate show, if I may say, at least how I feel about it. I put all the words together, all the ideas together, without hemming and hawing too much. And got a cool audience tonight. Love that Tess is joining us tonight. NGC and Tetrapodum, and Ellie Wynn was here, and Momark showed up. I love that. Nebula, Astralis. Who else showed up? I saw Redrum earlier and Hoosiers. All right. So I'll hang out for a few more minutes, but I might wrap it up right after this. So if you want a song or two, please request. And yeah, we'll try and do this again tomorrow if it's clearer. Maybe. Field, Dream Field. All right. So yeah, I think we've lost the moon, but is the stream better? I feel like it says excellent collection, excellent connection now. So, but no space, no footage. It's like, oh, now you have no footage to share. Internet's fine. So I'm asking for some questions in the chat before I wrap it up, because I feel like sometimes I wrap it up a little too abruptly and people are still thinking about it. It's definitely like I said, I was saying it's simple, but it's also highly complex in some ways, because if you've never thought about it before. But I know every one of y'all have definitely listened to me ramble along these filaments before. So tetrapodum, I see well. What might attach or attract an interstellar Birkeland current after all? So if I were to, let me actually see if I can pull up my paint program here and scribble some Markland convection, and we can consider what that's all about. As far as I understand it, it's essentially like there is no stillness in the etheric probability consciousness, right? Like the substance of everything, light or consciousness or self-awareness, right? The absolute fundamental of it. There is no point where that is zero Kelvin, basically. Nothing gets to an absolute no wiggle. So there's fundamental wiggle in the universe. That wiggle is what creates the oscillation, or at least that, like the absolute tiniest point and the absolute largest thing is wiggling, is oscillating at varying frequencies, different intervals. And harmonic fractal complexity is an emergent phenomenon from consciousness, and that's where we get humans, planets, all the things from fractal complexity of frequency. The structure of which is the fundamental geometric field that we see, this torus and the hypotrochoid, but this is really just outlining Birkeland filaments. And so you're asking an important question, which is what might actually attract an interstellar Birkeland current, is that these, essentially every wire in space, every little filament in space is wiggling, and after a while things wiggle close to each other because of fractal wiggling, ultimately, because large things, like a group of things is wiggling and then smaller filaments are wiggling, so the whole universe is a series of wiggles, Alan Watts, and at a certain point they wiggle close to each other, the same way people basically exist and stars exist. We are almost like, we necessitate the wiggle and the wiggle necessitates us. And same way sound and silence and light and dark, the necessitative relationship between the two, this becomes, what was it? This arises, that becomes, or basically self and other. So look at that, the moon came back. It's like, oh yeah, no problem, I'm here. I know I'm actually little like spinning around, dancing around the point, but I think that, yeah, like ultimately whatever wiggle at whatever scale, cosmic scale, the scale of creating a child, you know, from an embryo, excuse me, and this Markland convection, this twisting of the Birkeland filament is the torsion or the twisting, wiggling nature of the system itself. So I don't know how to really answer that without saying, like, it is probably fundamental to everything. So the universe is not only consciousness, but consciousness wiggles. So it is a really fundamental question. I don't have a perfect answer for it, or like really a true answer for it. But I would take that the answer for it is that it actually occurs. So stars occur, chakras occur, humans occur, bacteria occurs, quantum particles occur. And when I say occur, I say they are instantiated in the conscious field. So there is Markland convection or crossing of wires at every scale. And because we perceive it, it is there. You know, it's almost self-fulfilling or self-necessitative. And in a way, I don't deny that a lot of this thinking ultimately feels circular. Like, and we tend to say in science, or like, I don't know why I said it like that, but there is this understanding that, like, oh, circular reasoning is not good. But everything ultimately ends up being kind of recycled and cyclical and circular. So I definitely think that there's a place to start asking, like, what is fundamental consciousness? But I think we need to get there past the fact that that our old science says only humans are conscious, things are different, or only life is conscious, but these things are not conscious. So again, like, I don't have the answer, but I feel like we can get further down or up or along the Birkeland filament if we just move old science principles and evolve them to include the fact that, well, it's not just humans and animals that are conscious, but everything is conscious. And then we get to a place where we can start asking, like, what is that fundamentally? Because there might be a way to find out exactly, like, who's pulling the strings. But if you think, let me adjust the image real quick. If you think about the Zen idea of it, again, we brought ourselves here. We manifest ourselves, and therefore we must hold the answer to this as well. That seems logical. I love the way, like, I say logical, like, I know the standard of all logic, but why not? Why not? Let's see. I was gonna, bring up the paint program and scribble a wiggle. Wiggle a wiggle. The reason I know it's wiggles is because we are wiggles and we draw wiggles, right? So we are literally, when human beings create art, there's no reason why we wouldn't be using the fundamental structure of consciousness to create art. So we are drawing what we are. And it's so, I think that's much more, even romantic, but I mean, it's much more logical, again, versus like, oh, super random, humans happen to be this level of consciousness, and so on. So, paint program, and then let me make that yellow, make that a little bit larger. There we go. So if we imagine that we have filaments in space, lots of filaments in space. Actually, I shouldn't make them cross yet. So filaments, filaments, filaments. And what's happening is filaments are kind of twisting around each other, almost like our DNA. And then they coil. They come to this place where they start to coil a little bit more like that. This is where Markland convection happens, and you have coils within coils. And along these little intersections, this is what I imagine is where stars are instantiated, or where ideas come from, or where life comes from, these crossing of wires. And so these wires are initially wiggling at a certain temperature, and this is what is perceived, I think, as dark matter. Right? So dark matter is potential wiggle, and these wiggles end up crossing and creating points, instantiated consciousness, hydrogen atoms, human beings, or actually not human beings, these are chakras. A human being is the series of these, so a human being ultimately becomes kind of a twisted plasma filament, right? And then you have chakra, star, 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 star. Eyeballs form symmetrically, lungs form symmetrically. The chakras are at points where we use them, and they all have their own toroidal field. Excuse me, I drank a lot of coffee today. So, yeah, we're a stack of toroidal energy plasmoids. Well, we're a stack of plasmoids, or thread of plasmoids, and each plasmoid has its own field, which is a membrane or a brain. And so each person kind of ends up outlining this filament. That's why every animal has the same placement of eyeballs symmetrically, and ultimately even bacteria and tiny particles end up looking the same way. So I feel like this idea of Markland convection or Birkeland filaments crossing wires, creating this one super hot white spark. This spark is spinning super fast, and it's low complexity. And then it gets smaller, spins spins more slowly, and loses mass, loses brightness, intensity, and then ultimately we get down to a place where we're seeing our moon, and then we can trace back the lineage of our moon and reverse engineer it by looking at, when we look at humans, we're like, oh, there are babies, there are old people, there are midlife people, and then we infer from that that people go through a life cycle. You know, like Jeffrey was saying, if it's not like if you go to a nursing home and everybody's 90 years old and you're 40, then automatically scientists are like, oh, well, that person is next to a whole bunch of 90-year-olds, therefore that person must be also 90, right? But there's no logic to that. So yeah. Tetrapodum says something great, says Rupert was the one luring me to the EU 2013 lectures. I just rewatched those two parts, so Rupert Sheldrake, Thunderbolts Project, EU 2013. Rupert Sheldrake has been really clear on this idea actually for a long time. Like he and what's his name, Abraham something, and Terence McKenna. What's the guy's name? It's not Abraham Hicks. It's Abraham. Let's see. Sheldrake, McKenna, and Ralph Abraham. So even back in the day when Rupert Sheldrake, like back in the 80s, was talking about the morphogenic field, he was talking about panpsychism, he was talking about consciousness being fundamental, he was talking about the human biofield, basically the morphogenic field or morphic resonance, so essentially consciousness outside the extended mind. And I gotta say, Rupert is one of those untouchable people because not only does he prove it scientifically, but he's been very clear and on the right path for a very long time. Captain Swarm, it's a dark matter. Dark matter. How dark you matter. I don't know. I again, like saying dark matter, or even like, let's say Markland convection is Big Bang, right? So I know that everyone's gotten to this point where it's like either Big Bang is the greatest thing ever, or the detractors of Big Bang, even in the electric universe cosmology or like alternative physics model, are like down with Einstein, totally wrong, Big Bang is totally wrong. But a more measured approach is to take the good things out of it and to consider, like, what is this idea of a Big Bang, right? And so a Big Bang potentially could be the crossing of the Birkeland wires and instantiating a star growth, because fractally, what else really is there, right? And so maybe the Big Bang was just one instance of this. Because fractally, if you go all the way upwards, at some point our universe was a star. This is really what it's actually saying, is that if consciousness is fundamental and stellar metamorphosis is correct, then holistically, if you look up all the way up the scale fractally, then at some point our entire existence, like life in our system, had to also be cooked and baked inside a star. And so that's what's so crazy about it, is because fractally, at some point there had to be an instance of it. Now, was Big Bang the first instance of it? Maybe not, right? Maybe there's actually many instances of our universe instantiating. So let me adjust the image because our moon is back, which is great. But I'm just getting warnings all over the place. This stream's bitrate sucks, and glitchy glitch, de-glitch, de-glitch. All right. I see Cybercelly in the chat. What's going on? Look at that glow around the moon. It's so golden brown, very brown. So shout outs to Rupert Sheldrake, of course, and Eileen McCusick for imagining the human biofield, or at least not imagining it, but championing it. and actually sensing it with her tuning forks and explaining the idea of not only electric health, but giving me the idea that memory, human memory, is stored outside the body. It may be also stored fractally inside the body, but if we imagine that neuroscience, after 40 or 50 years slicing the brain open, doing all these different MRI scans, can only find a pattern of electricity lighting up in the brain, and no memories to be found at all. And you listen to mainstream, like type in 2022 current theories on consciousness again, or current theories on how the brain works, or current theories on where memories, just basic memories, like what happened yesterday, or what happened 5 years ago. We stored these. We were able to recall or remember very complex order fractals of sound and smell and sequences of information. And where is that actually stored? So mainstream science has absolutely no idea at this point. Like if you really take them at face value, I would imagine that in all the secret programs on Earth, that they must know almost everything I'm saying. If they don't, then it seems strange. But I would say that there must be a group of people that has all this information figured out. However, let's get back to the point, which is the complex order of our reality is what everybody's experiencing right now. There is no further complex order. There is the complex order that is right now. And that's what's very cool about it. And cyclical and unifying and holarchical. I see Jay Pershing in the chat. What's going on? It says dark matter is more probably plasma in dark mode. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that a little bit earlier when I had the diagram up. But that's what I think, again, like if we take a measured approach to mainstream science, it's not that everything is fake and everything is wrong. And we don't have to decry and denounce and denigrate old archetypal scientists. However, 100 years ago is 100 years ago, and now we have different understanding of things, and there should be room to be able to evolve science as well as people and planets. Evolution, if evolution is correct, which I think in some ways the modern understanding of evolution might not be exactly correct, but the idea of variation and evolutionary variation absolutely makes sense because we see it happening right now. There's a lot of proof for it. And therefore, I like being able to look at some of the mainstream stuff without the, I hate this is all fake idea, mentality, and be able to pick and choose some good ideas from it in order to kind of bring them forward and use that like that foundation to evolve our sciences. I see Lost Brooklyn in the chat. What's going on? Long time. Shout out. Let's see. Tetrapodum says, great. I always felt about it that way, about the Big Bang. Cool. Well, I don't know if you saw the same thing, but back in the day when we looked at The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene, you had this little section where they talked about it, where Edward Witten, who's again being a little bit decried, denounced right now because of string theory, because people don't know what to make of string theory. But Ed Witten proposes this multi-brain idea where there are slices of the bread, and the slices of bread hit each other at certain points, and that's what creates multiple Big Bangs. So instead of it being slices of bread, it's actually twisting coaxial Birkeland filaments that end up tightening and ultimately cross wires and create stars, or point instantiation of a dipole moment that we perceive as conscious reality, as luminous matter, lighted matter. Just Hanging Moon is totally smoke obscured here due to fires. Sorry about that, Cybercelly, did I say hi? I think I did. Oh, Kaiser Rotor's in there. It says, out there in the universe, way beyond what we can reach. Well, it's funny because you say that, but we also in a way, we can reach out into space. We can go. The fact that we can see stars is our mind sending out our like entire plasma stack, sending out a signal into space and receiving info from space. So we kind of are way more powerful than we even have been led to believe. It's just self-realization, ultimately. So Jay Pershing says, I heard a theory that memories are stored within xenon gases within the brain. I still think that the idea that we carry memory in shells around the human body makes more sense, because it's the shell around the body that informs the body's shape. So our field, our auric energy field, which is essentially plasma in dark mode and glow mode, certain parts of it fire, and most of it is just like invisible lightning bolts at all scales that hold us in place. And we expand outwards, and it still holds us in place. And therefore, I think that what we're saying here, that memory can also be stored in the cloud. Right now we store information in the cloud, and we don't think anything of it. So why wouldn't humans also store our organic data in our cloud? This idea that it all has to be inside the skull is very limited, literally and metaphorically. You know what I mean? Like, it's such an antiquated view that everything must be inside the brain, and the brain produces consciousness, is really like limited, and myopic in its thinking. It's the total opposite if you imagine that consciousness builds brains, and then brains are able to use the field to perceive itself, and therefore in and of itself is instantiated consciousness. Circular but logical, as opposed to like, no, one thing is that thing, this thing is that thing, humans are that thing, planets are that, stars do this. It's isolationism in this weird way, because it doesn't even take into account what we see, right? We don't see planets clumped together. We do see planets at different ages in our solar system. But the narrative tells you one thing, and if you question it, people say you're crazy. But I don't care, because I think I love this stuff, and I think mainstream has a lot to offer. Conspiracy has a lot to offer, but usually the truth is like a mix of a lot of things. You just have to decide what you want to see. The brain accesses consciousness. Well, I think the brain accesses electrical impulses and field torsion, but I think the word consciousness is the interaction between self and other, or point and cloud, or nucleus and shell. Consciousness is that interaction. I think consciousness itself, I don't think there is a thing like, consciousness is not a thing. Consciousness is a pattern, if you'll allow. Chris Parker, what's going on? That data costs money, brother. You on our level? What? I don't know what you're talking about, but good to see you. Somebody was asking about you yesterday, Parker. Hope you're doing well tonight. Let's see, Tess says, let's see, I'm trying to follow this through. Kazerator says we store all our memories in the moon. Well, I think the moon definitely feels earthly memories. It must, you know, but I think the moon is just having its own experience, right? It's pretty freaking old at this point. It's like a little old person walking around town being like, mind your own business, sonny. I don't know where that voice came from. Haha, I am drunk, my bad. Chris Parker, you are forgiven, always forgiven. Tess is saying, or that water has memory, and every cell in our body has water, therefore memory. But, yes, correct. In addition, I guess what I was saying earlier to bring it down even more fundamentally, right? So stars, that instantiation, point consciousness, star, chakra, quantum instantiation, dipole, is hydrogen. Hydrogen is light manifest as interaction with self, being consciousness, consciousness being a resonant pattern, or a pattern that is oscillating, and therefore water arises from consciousness. So water comes from intelligence, so to speak. And therefore, of course, water seems to be intelligent and be able to store information, because the field is not unintelligent. The field is intelligent. That's what's so cool about it. It's like, just because we don't see the field doesn't mean the field is not actually intelligent and aware, because the field pushes back on us. So the field itself is spatially aware. When I say the field, I mean the air around your body pushes your body, squeezes your body, but also your body is gravitationally collapsing along a Birkeland filament, your spinal column. And so is our solar system, and planets, and molecules, and hydrogen. So hydrogen, in essence, water, in its very primitive, primal phase state, is fundamentally light resonating with itself, in a way, creating a resonant coupling, and that coupling is an instantiation of consciousness that leaves a memory in the field, and by having that memory in the field, it itself remembers this shell and now lives as a multiplicative of this shell. Therefore, that's why, as I speak, I am actively creating a symmetrical moment where I'm instantiating consciousness with my voice, but I'm also storing that memory symmetrically behind me, and therefore we can retrace and look back at what I've done and what I've said, but the next moment is co-collaborative and not even formed yet. I'm forming it from the potential of the field, and therefore the future is not set in stone, but it is orderly based on our perception of our fundamental geometry, which there is, and there's tons of proof for that. Sorry, y'all, if my stomach is a little bit funny, just mostly because I had like 4 cups of coffee, so forgive me. But I do have a lot to say tonight. If you hear my belly grumbles, sorry. Let's see. Esoteric Gold, what's happening? I want to see that majestic cities on the moon, dial that baby in. You're dreaming tonight, my friend. We're having like the worst clouds possible. Yesterday was bad, but tonight's even worse. So no clarity on the moon. Ce soir, mon ami. Maybe tomorrow or the day after. Jay Pershing says, has anyone seen Don Scott's model of the sun? So I've gone through kind of phases with Don Scott's model of the sun as well. I think a lot of it is correct. I think Buddy Doherty has explained it even more thoroughly, and he worked on a paper, showed it to Don Scott. Don Scott and him met up at the last conference, and Don Scott was blown away by Buddy's work. So the way Buddy explains it, I think all this stuff falls into the same configuration that I've been talking about as well. I might be wrong, but Buddy explains a lot of the math behind it, a lot of the fractal nature of it, the geometric nature of it. Don Scott talks about the coupling and the flowing of electrons, and I don't know enough specific lingo to really talk about an electric star the way Don Scott does, but he does talk about several different things. One is counter-rotation, because of the coaxial twisting Birkeland filament at the center of things, and therefore that makes a lot of sense. And then you have electric stars, which electricity really is kind of a catch-all, but in essence, connected stars along a circuit network. He also talks about how stars function and behave and sputter and all these different things, and I think a lot of that is actually correct. Now, I would say when you look at stellar metamorphosis and you listen to Jeffrey Walensky, you'll see that Don Scott is actually not really looking at other things maybe. I mean, I know he's an old cat and he's probably not looking up every YouTube video, but I really think if you imagine stars turning into planets and moons, it actually fits with that, but it actually expands upon it a lot more, and then it explains all the different types of stars and how stars work. I think it's a lot more elaborate when you mix electric stars with the Sky Scholar stuff, with condensed matter, like Pierre-Marie Robitaille's understanding Kirchhoff's law, even though that also is in a way kind of myopic. I think you have to look at all of those different things together to get a better sense of it. But ultimately, I think a lot of it is correct. A lot of Don Scott stuff is right. A lot of Pierre-Marie Robitaille's stuff is right. And Jeffrey Walensky's stuff is right. All of them, I don't want to say all of them are doing something because everyone might look at it differently. But for me, I feel like if they work together, it would be ironed out very quickly. Jay Pershing says, Doherty and me talk sometimes, lol. I really need to get back to that. I did a show, actually, with Buddy back in the day, the Electric View, and we chatted a bunch. I don't know, I feel like that was a really pivotal moment for me where like I kind of got sick of the whole thing because there are so many kind of back and forths about things. But now that I've gotten here, I feel like there's a consciousness being sort of answered via Human Biofield, Rupert Sheldrake, Alan Watts, and Electric Universe, coupled with stellar metamorphosis and understanding some of the mainstream stuff a bit more, like watching Alexander Unzicker break down Dirac's large number and Drake's equation, and Stephen Crothers breaking down, what a black hole is and Schwarzschild radius and what people consider contemporary mainstream stuff. I had to take a few years to really dig in and try and grasp what the complex word salads meant. And now that I'm getting to a place where I sort of get what they're implying, you realize that they're using very complex language and math to define what is fundamentally right in front of us. Because once you take consciousness as the fundamental, everything emerges from consciousness. Therefore, you can write any type of math you want. Math will always work because when you're trying to solve things, we can impose rulers and structures on a very infinite universe. But ultimately, the math is not more fundamental than consciousness, right? Or fundamental than light. And again, another thing that kind of segues me there, which is this idea of a gravity-driven universe. Well, right now on Earth, we don't use gravity to power our households. You know what I mean? And we don't use a gravity EKG. We use an EKG that's run on electricity. So humans are electric, not gravity-driven. And so this idea that gravity does all this stuff in space and there's no electricity, two of the biggest fundamental things on Earth right now, human body and medical devices attached to it are electric. And our power grid that we all use is an electric grid. It's not a gravity-driven grid. Now, gravity is an emergent phenomenon. I'm not saying that gravity has nothing to do with it. I'm just saying primarily electricity is clearly the more preeminent, more connected, more primary thing than gravity. It's just a very weird debate online where people are like, oh, gravity does all this, and electricity really, no, there's no electricity in space actually, but there is some, but it's really not that much. And vacuum. And of course, vacuum, again, really, there is nothing that is nothing. Because if you can perceive a vacuum, then it exists, even if it's potential dark mode plasma. And therefore, there is no nothingness. There is always somethingness. Because as soon as you say there is somethingness, then it has been instantiated into consciousness. Okay. Let's see. Buddy sounds like a good guy. Buddy is, I think, one of the smartest people, and he's a great artist, and I think his Electric Universe video is one of the best. He talks about magnetohydrodynamics, Bessel function, harmonic growth, fractal recursion, fundamental geometric structure. I would love him to look at the stellar metamorphosis stuff. I know that Buddy sometimes stops in here, but if you talk to him, ask him about Jeffrey Walensky, what he thinks, it would be lovely to hear that. All right, I'm going to get a little drink here. And we got some Luna, at least, for a little bit, which is awesome. I feel like I've been going pretty hardcore tonight but my ideas are really sharp, I feel like. So let me know in the chat any more questions, any more thoughts on what I'm saying. For me, it's because it's fractally getting more and more acute and more focused here in my field as I explain it to you. We do this brute force mechanic where I go through it and I go through it and I go through it, and eventually it all coalesces into a star of information. So This one's called Silly Stars. Always got to keep a sense of humor, though, even if we wiggle. Alright, hopping back in here for the last leg. Yeah, I guess I'm really hungry, so I hope it was alright to listen to me tonight. There was so much to talk about, and I just want to follow up this last point here. I'm seeing like this gravity idea. So as far as I understand gravity, I think it ultimately results, it's kind of an effect that we notice, which is when 2 points create a coupling, they create a null zone, a counter space sink. which I imagine these counter space sinks on a cosmological scale are black holes. So there's centers of donuts where essentially I imagine that the wiggle is the least wiggle possible. So basically nothingness. It's close to nothingness, but essentially between 2 points there's a sink, a countersink, where both of these objects are attracted to, or these points are attracted to. And this attractive force is what we perceive as gravity. And the reason quantum gravity exists, human gravity exists, and cosmological gravity exists is because it's a phenomenon that occurs from the coupling of the two instantiations, self and other, point and shell, nucleus and shell, or point and point. And so between 2 points, you create this countersink, and each object is attracted to this point in space, because it's trying to basically get to the lowest energy it can, the least amount of energy expenditure. So it's trying to reach an equilibrium. Same way when two circles come together and they create a boundary layer, nested hexagons emerge as an emergent phenomenon from the packing of spheres or circles, trying to reach minimal stasis or minimal work. And I imagine that between 2 points, minimal work is a boundary layer, and these 2 points try their best to get to this boundary layer, and that's why gravity is actually an attractive force, as well in a way I think as a repulsive force to a degree, right? Because it's gradiated, it's not linear throughout, it's not monotonic throughout. So that's not my idea of gravity. That's actually Ken Wheeler. If you look at the stuff he's done under a ferrocell, pulling two magnets together and creating a countersink where these two objects actually are attracted to, you'll see that he explains gravity in the best way, in the most eloquent and logical way that I've heard it before. So Ken Wheeler is definitely, I think, if you want to understand magnetism, light, gravity, Ken Wheeler is the guy. I've reinterpreted it my way, but I think it actually makes sense within the whole, because basically you're talking about consciousness, which is point and point interaction. That's what consciousness actually is. Once a point interacts with another point or a shell, that in and of itself creates what we perceive as consciousness. And then you take it as fractal, and it's all the way up and down. You're talking about the human body being an antenna, which is also a great idea because, of course, this now makes a lot more sense that humans are antennas, but they're antennas of their own field as well, not just the Earth field and other people, but their own field. So what I had here earlier, if we just take a person and stick person, is essentially the outline coaxial Birkeland filament, and really actually the Birkeland filament goes out that way, and it's twisting down our spinal column, and the collective oscillation of each of these chakras or Z pinches is what creates these layers. Because the ether or the air or the other shells from other things are pushing against us, and we're pushing outwards, and therefore the merger of the two creates these dipole moments, instantiations of moments. So if we're talking about humans being an antenna, of course we're the perfect antenna, not just a collective chakra antenna, but individual, like throat chakra, heart chakra, stomach chakra, sacral chakra. Every single one of the chakras or the Z pinches essentially gravitationally collapsing information towards it, but so is everything else. And therefore the interaction between stomach and the field of stomach, so the stomach can have its own brain, its own thoughts. One thing that I will talk about on a different show is when I was listening to Daniel Theis, Theis, talking about fundamental consciousness. He's a liver pathologist, so he's like a mainstream guy who is super paid. He's super well paid, and therefore he's like, you know what, I'm paid, so I'm going to think about these fringe ideas. Fringe ideas being panpsychism and consciousness being a fundamental property of our reality. So he actually says that as a liver pathologist that he's discovered this, the word is evading me now, but basically counter space inside the body. And now they've named it a new organ. I want to say it's like Ethereum or something. That's not Ethereum, but it's like, I will find it and I will share it with you. But yeah, he's like, essentially what he's referring to is like an invisible layer of bubble plasma that is the counter space of our body layers. So if you imagine everything in between our body layers is an electromagnetic connective cloud, and that's how the field consciousness, how the stomach connects to the brain instantaneously, and that's how we feel the rest of our body using a field consciousness with a thin layer of diffuse matter in between everything, using induction and convection. It's really a brilliant idea, and he's just, so science is essentially, we're at the precipice of discovering a new organ, and it's an organ that encompasses all of the counter space inside the body. Okay, so human biofield, Eileen McCusick, Rupert Sheldrake, Gerald Pollack, electric star, condensed matter, and then we have the idea of the Vedas and Zen teachings where they already understood this, right? It's when the koan, right? When they look at everything in the universe, they're like, pretty much, what was it? I'm trying to remember what the koan. It's like looking at the hills and valleys. That's the short body of God. That's the tall body of God. So an aperture on the great lens, on the great camera of life, the great chamber of life, or teats on the same sow, as Alan Watts would say. So we're all an aperture of the whole, but it doesn't mean we're not the actual whole, right? And WHOLE, whole. So yeah, human beings being a toroidal plasma stack using emergent phenomenon to interact with the field, to remember as opposed to dismember information, and the short-term memory close to the human body. So you're like, what did I do yesterday? I remember all of it. That's why the brain lights up, because it's interacting with field. So this model, which I just have derived from many other models, explains very clearly how and why the brain lights up in different parts, but you can't actually find memories in the brain. And then short-term memory close to you, birth far from you. So when you try and think about your birth, it's very diffuse and maybe 30 feet away from you. When I ask you, like, what did you do when you were a teenager, that's closer to you. And I imagine that also every planet and moon and atom also layers shells the same way. So the materials inside a planet are layered in this fashion. Our memories are layered in this fashion. Our entire human physique, structurally, internally, is layered this way. If you look at an arm or a tree, and you see the center of the tree and the dendritic ridges, or you see the cross-section of a limb. You know, we have the bone, the hollowness of a bone, and the fascia, and the muscle, and the tissue, and the dermis, and the epidermis, and on and on. And then outside the human skin, we have follicles, hairs, electric filaments, field. So the layering of our actual construct is also the layering of our informational field. And so if a human has a field, then a quantum particle has a field, then a planet has a field, then a solar system, and on and on and on. At every size, fields are basically not just fields, but like self and unit and field are interacting with potentially innumerous versions of themselves, of ourselves. So humans being an antenna tapped into their own field, but also the greater collective Akashic field. This makes way more sense to me than just humans are antennas, you turn them off, all of a sudden all of reality goes on, but you're dead, and that's pointless. But I don't think that's the case, because I think the reality that's being created in this field is a co-created reality between you and field. It's not just field alone, and humans really have nothing to do with it. clearly humans have a huge part to do with it because they are a necessitative function, an inverse function of the whole, right? We're one side of the coin. There is no consciousness or life coin without human and field. Jay Pershing and Tetrapodum both mentioned Velikovsky here about cultural amnesia from ancient cataclysms. I've thought about this a lot, and it definitely makes sense that Earth has been through a lot of different cataclysms, and a lot of these cataclysms were experienced or witnessed by intelligent life. And therefore we have record of these catastrophic events. But again, if consciousness is driven if consciousness is driven and is affected by electric discharge, differences in voltages, anodic cathodic variances, all these different situations that arise from fundamental consciousness inhabiting an electrogeomagnetic field driven by electricity, then you actually potentially have consciousness shifting and evolving and changing over a period of time or over frequency of oscillation. And therefore, cultural amnesia might come from a place of just being so far away from us at this point in the field that we don't see it as clearly as we'd like. And therefore, we are remembering, as opposed to dismembering the past, by reconnecting with bits of information like a book and a movie and the language of an old scientist. All these are fractals, right? These are tiny little instantiations of carved space. Even words on a page are carved, right? And so we are remembering all these little bits of data. But some of these bits of data are just so far diffuse and have been so molded by the field that it's very hard for us to have a truly clear one-to-one relationship with it. Now, I would imagine that potentially the Earth remembers its own past. So if you remember yesterday, what is yesterday to the Earth, right? The Earth on an order of magnitude might remember the last 100,000 years quite easily, but it might not remember 2 billion years ago. And I like that. I like playing with that idea. So, like, taking Velikovsky as gospel, okay, here's a point where like Velikovsky may have been right about a lot of things, but maybe he was wrong potentially about Venus, right? So his prediction was that Venus was actually a younger planet, and the idea, really mainstream idea, is that Venus or Mars might be able to host life. But it actually, in stellar metamorphosis, these planets are now desiccated. It's like saying we're going to raise a body from the dead. We're going to take this skeleton and make it and give it new flesh and new life. And like that doesn't actually make a lot of sense. First of all, we can't really do it, and it's kind of pointless. And you're just creating like you're just not letting this energy move on. So it's very anti-Zen to try and resurrect the dead or to try and have a forever body, right? You're not really going with the flow if that's the case, which is why we can't do it. All right, I think it's time. It's midnight. It's been a really deep show, I think, one of the better ones. Thanks for bearing with me through all the streaming buffering woes. I hope all the audio was good on this one. And Jay Pershing says, genetics must retain some memory or its memory misunderstood. I think genetic memory is also in the field, right? But if you imagine the field as I've just explained it, then the Earth has its own memory, the Moon has a memory. So humans collectively have a memory, right? So when two people are together, they create their own new plasma field. But it's much more diffuse. It's much more diffuse. True Manzu, what's going on? Yeah, I'm about to wrap it up here. I've been on for a while, and my neck is super duper sore, but my brain is firing on all cylinders into the field. And I appreciate all of you so much for hanging out tonight. Happy full moon. I know it's already afterwards, but full moon, blessed full moon. A lot of good energy to all those passing and near passing, all the elderly women right now who seem to be moving along the Birkeland filament. And yeah, definitely check out Jeffrey Walensky, Stellar Metamorphosis. Check out Eileen McCusick, Human Biofield. Rupert Sheldrake, Morphogenic Field, and all his other stuff. Halton ARP with his Redshift, Seeing Red, and many others, but those for now. If you check out Jeffrey, ask him some questions, give him some love. I know he's on break right now, so he's probably not super available, but I think go through some of his videos, pose some questions here. We'll talk about it some more, and catch y'all really soon. Put a song here to take us out. This one is Dream Boat. On a high note, Dream Boat. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful rest of your night. This is your captain signing off from another trip. One of the best, one of the funnest. Take care, everybody.